Welcome to episode 193 of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. Have you heard of a molar pregnancy? A molar pregnancy occurs when the placenta doesn't develop normally. Instead, a tumor forms in the uterus and causes the placenta to become a mass of fluid-filled sacs, also called cysts. About 1 in every 1,000 pregnancies is a molar pregnancy. Today's guest was diagnosed with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome and experienced a chemical pregnancy and an untimely loss. After she switched providers, they determined IVF would be the best option to grow her family. Brittney Cain went through mental health challenges due to the ups and downs of the IVF process, especially after getting pregnant during her first round of IVF and it resulting in a molar pregnancy. In this episode, Brittney shares her experience with IVF and switching fertility specialists that she felt safe with, undergoing a frozen embryo transfer and an uncomplicated pregnancy with her rainbow baby, and pregnancy after loss with induction and a C-section. This episode is for you to listen to if you've ever experienced a molar or chemical pregnancy or IVF. This episode is for you to listen to if you want to know when is the right time to switch providers for the best outcome for you and your baby. Here is Brittney Cain. Welcome, Brittney, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I am Brittney. I am in my 30s. I live with my husband in Atlanta, Georgia. And basically, my presence on the internet is just kind of to shine a light on the Black experience of infertility, as it relates to my personal story.
Yes. So let's talk about your journey through, adolescence, adulthood, your motherhood journey, and your loss story. Can you just take us back on your journey and share with us your loss story?
Okay. So my husband and I both attended Georgia Tech down here in Atlanta. And, we've been here ever since. We got married in 2015. And we took that year, everybody says, take a year, travel, do XYZ before you start having kids because, basically your life is over once you have kids. So everybody says. So we got married, and then in 2016, I had been on birth control pills since I think like senior or junior year in high school for painful periods was essentially what I got on it for. There were some cycles where I had to stay home or I was throwing up on the start of my cycle. So, we went to the primary care physician and she was just kind of like, yeah, just take these birth control pills. It'll make your cycle less painful. If only I knew, what back then, what I know now, then I wouldn't have, accepted that for an answer. Yeah, we get married in 2015. 2016, we decide, we've done our traveling. We took a big trip to Europe for our first anniversary. And then we decide to get off the birth control pill and just kind of see what happens. So that was October 2016. I got off of the pill and I had a 61-day cycle. And I thought that was really strange, even though I really didn't know my body or my cycle outside of birth control pills. So I contacted my primary doctor at the time. And she said, okay, that's pretty normal. It can take up to a year for your cycle to regulate after getting off the pill. That information didn't sit well with me also because, everybody, I guess they scare women and teenagers into thinking as soon as you get off birth control, you're going to instantly get pregnant. That was always kind of a red flag to me. So my mother is also a nurse. And she was the first one to bring up PCOS in conversation. I had never heard that word before. And she said, maybe you have PCOS, maybe you should try your OB to see what's going on. So I waited for that next cycle to come. And again, I had another 60+ day cycle. So I went to my obstetrician who actually ran the correct test to diagnose me with PCOS. So we did blood tests and ultrasound of my ovaries to see what's going on. And she did diagnose me with that. So this is now March 2017. So she made it seem really easy. She said, PCOS, you're just not ovulating. And that's why I had these really long cycles. So what she was going to give me was some oral ovulation induction medication. And just, hopefully that was the only problem that we had there. So I did one cycle at my OB And I'd had a few friends and a family member who had been through infertility, primary infertility. And they kind of suggested like, hey, your OB really isn't the expert in helping you get pregnant. She's there, for gynecological issues and, monitoring an actual pregnancy. So your reproductive endocrinologist is where I should go. So we started with one here at a clinic in May of 2017. And through there, we did 7 more months of oral ovulation induction medication. And according to ultrasounds, I was ovulating through each cycle, but we did IUI and then we did timed intercourse and nothing was really working. So that fall of 2017, I had a pretty stressful job. I was working a job that required me to be on call through the night on different days of the week and sometimes over the full weekend. So that was really stressing me out with trying to figure out when I could fit in these fertility appointments and how would this line up with my cycle if I'm on call, if it's a day that, we're supposed to be, trying to make a baby and I have to handle an incident, what do I do? So that was really stressing me out. The whole infertility thing really got to me and I just hit a breaking point then. And I knew I needed to, seek some outside help, whether it be through faith and my therapist. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in infertility around then also. So we had at this clinic that we were in 2017, I kind of felt like we were just a number. And, we were just kind of going through the motions. We're like, okay, maybe we won't be here so long because everybody says that PCOS is pretty easy to treat. So we had one IUI, and I remember it was around the same time of year in October. And we had waited maybe 3 hours. IUIs on Saturday. If you're familiar with fertility clinics, Saturdays are usually pretty busy days. They're usually the essential appointments, monitoring appointments for Ivf cycles. So it can be pretty busy. So I remember we had, our trigger shot and we were told to come back on Saturday at this time to go have an IUI. And I remember waiting like 3 hours in the waiting room. And the doctor who was doing the IUI that day kind of walked in, didn't really apologize for the wait, did the IUI really quickly and walked out. And that was kind of the last straw for my husband and I. And also that day I had to go to one of my good friend's baby showers at that point too. So that day was just a lot going through everything. So we decided to take a break over the holidays of 2017 and regroup with a new physician in January. So I had been doing some research. By now, we went to a research university. So I was very, type A. I'm going to research everything. I'm going to see who's out there. And I was specifically looking for a doctor who was a Black woman who practiced in reproductive endocrinology, which is a very, very slim number. Luckily in Atlanta, we have we have 2 that are pretty well known here. So I chose one physician, and I knew as soon as we met her in January that she was going to, help us get through and end up having a baby. So we got really good vibes from her. We really agreed with her plan, and she was on board with the plan that we wanted to take. And that was the end of January of 2018. And we met her on Wednesday. And that Sunday, I found out that I was pregnant the conventional way. Since I had already seen this new clinic and I was considered one of their patients, they monitored me through everything that was to come with this, what ended up being a molar pregnancy. So okay, this is a long timeline that happened with the molars. So the beginning of February, we did our HCG beta tests and they came back a little low, but they were still doubling. So everybody was happy with that. I think I did a 3 in the beginning. And then we did an ultrasound a week later. So at that first ultrasound, things were looking a little, I think that was the gestational sac wasn't quite shaped the way it should be. And we were missing, I think, a fetal pole then. But since it was a conventional, and I like to shy away from using the term natural conception, the conventional way, we really didn't know when I ovulated because we weren't tracking, we were just taking a break. So, everybody was still optimistic and said, okay, come back next week and we'll see what we can see. So we came back that next week And, we're still getting HCG blood tests, and my HCG was never pretty high, which with a molar pregnancy, a pretty high HCG is usually one of the first indicators that something is not quite right. So we came back that next week and things still weren't quite right. Things didn't look as they should on the ultrasound. But there was, maybe they could see a heartbeat, maybe they couldn't, maybe there was a sac, maybe they couldn't. It was all very much up in the air. And that's when our doctor floated the idea that, hey, maybe this is a molar pregnancy going on. And essentially a molar pregnancy is the cells that make up the placenta of a growing baby. They kind of over multiply, kind of like in the same way that a tumor would. It's not cancerous on the outset, but if the moles continue to grow without treatment, it can turn into a form of cancer. So they're really high risk, and they usually didn't happen to people, my age, younger women. I think it was the risk factor is either under 25 or over 45 that are more likely to get it. And, it occurs in 1% of pregnancy. So this was something very rare. But, we were we never lost faith, I think, through those couple of weeks, because everyone was so, it's too late to call. It's too early to call to see what this is. So, even though our spirits were kind of battered going through this week after week and doing HCG, that was kind of hard. It was really hard right there. So we are now into March 21st. I remember this specifically because the DNC had to happen the day before my husband's birthday of 2018. We had another ultrasound, and the technician was kind of like, I've never seen this before. Let me go get your doctor, who luckily we were going to a satellite office that my RE practiced out of. So she was right there, and it was her small team, and she was very close to the admin, unlike the previous clinic we had been with, who had, there was a lot of moving parts there. So she comes in, she takes over the ultrasound, and on the ultrasound, if you're, familiar with what a baby or a gestational sac is supposed to look like, it was a bunch of holes. So like everywhere in the ultrasound, it just looked like black circles were everywhere. And she was like, okay, I'm pretty confident in saying that this is a molar pregnancy. There's no trace of like embryonic tissue. We need to have a DNC immediately, because this can be very dangerous if we continue to let this go on. So I remember like just the care that she took, and she was amazing. She was an angel to both of us. I remember she was going out of town that Friday, and she had me in last minute that Thursday, and she was going to do it herself to make sure that she got everything. Because with a molar pregnancy, if there is retained tissue, the retained tissue can still continue to grow and multiply and cause problems. So we had the DNC, and she sent everything off to pathology because she wanted to be 100% sure of my treatment plan going forward. And that next Monday, I believe she called me and called me from her vacation and told me the results. And she said, Brittney, this is a molar pregnancy, and this is what this means for your fertility journey. So with a molar pregnancy, because of the way that the moles can continuously grow, they're fed by the HCG hormone. So as I mentioned a little earlier, a high HCG, a really high HCG for the weeks pregnant you are, is kind of an early indicator that something might be a little off. My numbers were fine, so that didn't tip us off there. So HCG feeds these little moles that grow where your placenta should be growing. And I need to not have HCG in my system for at least 6 months to make sure that it's not another molar pregnancy growing back. So that was really hard to hear after we had taken 3 months off the year before, and we thought we were going to get started in January and do IVF and just be on the road to baby. And then we had this surprise conventional conception happen at the end of January, and now we're here at the end of March, and we have nothing to show for it. So that was a really dark time in our journey. So there are two different types of molar pregnancies, a complete molar and a partial molar, and my pathology came back as complete. So that's also one that has more risk of recurrence later on. So what I had to do was I had to go in for weekly HCG checks to make sure they were negative. And that's just kind of very anticlimactic when you go into a fertility clinic where everyone's trying to get pregnant and you're trying to make sure that you're not every single week. So they followed my HCG down from, I think at the time of DNC, it was about 60, and anything below 60,000, and anything below 5 is considered a negative. So they followed me down every week until I hit negative. That was about May 15th when I finally hit a negative number. And I had to have 2 negatives in a row per week. And then I have to have 6 months of monthly negatives. So once I hit 0, my doctor was, this would take us to November when I was finally cleared of the molar. So once I hit 0, though, the first 0 before the monthly started, my doctor said in the meantime, we could go ahead and start an IVF cycle, with no transfer until I was cleared because of the HCGs. She didn't want that to kind of aggravate anything in my system. So in August 2018, we did our IVF cycle. It was really successful. We had a large number of embryos created out of that IVF cycle. And we did decide to genetically test them, especially since we felt like this molar pregnancy was so rare that it happened to us. We didn't really want to be surprised in that aspect, anything super rare genetic happening again. And at the time, I don't know if the testing is advanced a little bit, but PGS testing only detects partial molar pregnancy. So there still was a chance that one of our embryos could have been a complete molar again, but that's a risk you take. Science can't account for everything just yet, right? So we had those embryos created in August, and I still had 4 more negative checks after that before I was cleared to start transfer. So around this time also, my angel of a doctor, she got out of practice for a few months. So we were switched over to another one of her colleagues. He also turned out to be amazing. And he kind of got us through that last finish line there also. At that point, we were so determined. We were like, listen, we're going to let it happen. We're going to make this happen with this clinic, no matter what. Like nothing is going to stop us. We've had a bunch of setbacks in 2018. Let's just go for it. So we started medications to transfer in October. For a transfer, that would be the first 2 weeks of November. I started on these medications, and then you go in for an appointment the week before your transfer is supposed to be scheduled to see how your lining is looking. So I go in for that appointment. The tech is she's like, oh yeah, this looks okay. So I wasn't thinking anything of, anything negative would come out of that appointment. So I wait all day because they're supposed to call back and see how I adjust my dosage or get the okay to start progesterone to prepare for the transfer. And it's going past the time that I should have gotten a call from one of the nurses. So as soon as close of business happened, I got a call from the doctor. And as soon as I heard from the doctor, I knew that it was bad news because everything that we had been through that year, when the doctor has to call you personally, that's usually never a good sign. So he said, basically, my lining never got to, your lining is supposed to be, I think it's called trilaminar, supposed to have those 3 stripes for a good home for an embryo to implant and grow. My lining didn't have that. And he was concerned that I may have had some scarring from the previous DNC or some extra tissue left over from the molar pregnancy. So he wanted to stop my medications, cancel the cycle, and do a hysteroscopy to just go inside my uterus and make sure that there was nothing, no polyps and no extra tissue that shouldn't have been there affecting the efficacy of a transfer. So it was a really hard decision. I remember crying. I was going to meet my mom for dinner, and I was just crying at dinner at this place, at this Cuban restaurant. And I'm sure everybody thought, what's going on over there? But I was just so tired and so done, with 2018. We've been through a lot. Why can't we just get there? That was a really hard time also. But in the end, we decided to go ahead and do the hysteroscopy because we didn't want to feel like we didn't give our embryo transfer its best chance. So early November, we did hysteroscopy. Luckily, they didn't find anything. So that next transfer medication protocol started up, and I was on almost 10 times the amount of medication that I was previously to help get my lining to where it needed to be. So this takes us up to the Monday before Thanksgiving. I've been on these medications for a few weeks. I go in for the lining check appointment. My lining is good. It's still a little thin, but and looking through some of my history, it seems that thin lining just might be a characteristic of me even before the molar pregnancy happened, but we did get the go ahead to transfer. And then that next week after Thanksgiving, on November 28th, which is also my dad's birthday. So I thought that was a good sign that things were going to be okay, that we transferred one of our embryos. We just decided to pick, they told them to pick whichever was the best quality. And that embryo ended up being our son. And he is now 14 months old. He was born in August 15th of 2019. And that was on his due date. That's crazy how that happened. But yeah, he's just been the best thing ever.
Yes. And it's been such a pleasure to watch him grow up through your social media as you share your experience with him. But what I did not know, and you just educated me and the listeners, is about the 6-month waiting and check-in for HGG levels. Oh my, and thank God that you had a good endocrinologist who could really guide you and say, hey, you still could go through with your fertility treatments, because what if you would have had to wait a whole nother 6 months before you even were able to go through IVF? Oh my God.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that was really, really hard to hear that news. We were praying that it wasn't a molar pregnancy because of that. So yeah, that's the current research. The recommendation with a complete molar pregnancy, it's weekly HCGs until negative. Then you have to have 2 negatives in a row. And then from there, 6 monthly negatives. And, we tried to fight it. I tried to find all the research I could to say like, hey, this case, I remember I brought her a case study that said, once you hit 0, the chance of recurrence is really, really small. But she was like, I don't want to take any chances here. So, and
what would have happened if you all naturally conceived again during that 6-month period? So would have created another molar?
Well, that would have been the thing, right? So we didn't know. I guess the chance of recurrence within that 6 months is the highest, I'll say. So we didn't know. We wouldn't have known until you hit that 7 weeks and you can do an ultrasound, what's going on in there. And there are some cases, a lot of cases in molars, you don't even see them on ultrasounds. In my case, it was very apparent that there was something really wrong with what was going on in my uterus. But yeah, you usually don't see it as clear as we did. And I also did have a consult, and I forgot to bring this up. She insisted that I go have a consult with a gynecological oncologist. And I had a consult with her, her office happened to be next door to my doctor's office. And she said, in her practice, she's seen this maybe a handful of times in 20 years. But yeah, she hadn't seen any of that advance on to cancer. But I joined a bunch of support groups and things like that. And there were a number of women who didn't make it down to 0, within, I think there was the most critical time period is to make it down to 0 within 8 weeks of DNC. And that was a good indicator that you wouldn't have a recurrence. But yeah, it's a very large ordeal.
Yeah, it is. And it's so much so that it's not really, I don't think I've heard a lot of episodes in general about molar pregnancies in the infertility and loss world, but let alone for someone to share, their experiences very similar to yours with, underlying condition like PCOS coupled with this, that this happened, and then the infertility of trying to get pregnant afterwards. So I'm happy that we have you here to share your story. But I would love to kind of transition and talk about just how was you and your husband's thought process going through all of this? Because it seems like, 2018 was just one of those years, almost like 2020 for all of us right now.
I was thinking that when I was just talking about it.
Yeah, we're in this collective grief that we're all experiencing right now. But how did you manage through that? Because I think that people as they navigate this journey, as you get news after news and, you go 2 steps forward and you go 4 steps back, how did you all lean on each other to navigate that world of transitions and bad news and good news and all of that?
I want to say that one of the biggest things we had through 2018 was the support we got from friends, family, online friends. I had kind of talked about my infertility on my YouTube channel a little bit. Like I had right before in the 2017, I had come out like, hey, we're going through infertility. This is where we are. We're taking a break from the clinic. And so, my general friends kind of knew about it, but I didn't really talk about it. And then the day that I found out I had to have an emergency kind of DNC the next day, I just went on Instagram and I wrote this really long post and I was like, this is what's happening. And now we've been going through this and now we have to deal with this and it sucks. And I just kind of like was very transparent in how we were feeling. And we had so many people just reach out and wrap their arms around us. Our families, knew what we were going through, but our friends by and large really didn't know exactly what we were going through. There was so much flowers and there were meals dropped off and, donuts to make you smile and cards, and everyone just wrapped us up in so much love. And I think that kept us going the most throughout the process. It was really hard on my husband. He really didn't like to see me in surgery. And that year, I feel like I had a lot of things going on. He really didn't like to see that for me because he likes to be in control of things also. So he felt very out of control that whole year. But yeah, leaning on each other and just kind of checking in. I also, through 2018, found another therapist who specialized in infertility, and she also happens to be a Black woman. So, and I think having those providers that look like you and understand where you're coming from is so amazing and so key. And I know a lot of women, geographically don't have that option or financially don't have that option to see a doctor who's really there for you. The doctor who helped us go through our molar pregnancy, I had never had that level of care from any physician in my life. And, she's like the standard that I hold everyone up to now. Like, I'm like, oh, this is mediocre care compared to, how amazing she was. And she was also an IVF mom as well. So she had conceived her child through IVF. So she knew exactly how we were feeling and how we were doing. So yeah, I think our community just really helped us. And I always say, people, especially a lot of people, Black women in our community, aren't very open about their infertility journeys. And I just kind of blurred it all out on Instagram. And I feel like I say, my son, he's been known about like since the very second, like we had the transfer. And I think that's really amazing. How many people can say that like he's been loved by so many people since his transfer. And I think that's really cool.
No, he has. He sure has. I love that. So how have you and your family been navigating? It's like his first year of life, he's just over a year old and we're all shut down during this pandemic. So how has motherhood after infertility, loss, how has it been in his first year?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So he was born in August. So we had some warm weather those first couple of months. So this year specifically, I think it's so crazy because he was barely crawling. He had just started crawling when, everything shut down mid-March. And now he's almost running all over the place and he's talking. And I think that is so wild that we've been in the house long enough for him to be like a full-on little personality now. But I will say, one of the blessings, there's a lot of hard things going on for a lot of people, throughout COVID. And right now I am a stay-at-home mom, thanks to COVID too. So that's also been a transition. But my husband and I kind of see it as a blessing because we got to see him like every second of the day grow from this little baby who couldn't really crawl to this full-on toddler now. And I think that's really cool. And I know, had he still been in daycare or, had the world still been what we knew as normal, we would have missed a lot of his little funnier moments. So it's a blessing.
Yes, I love that you have seen the brighter side of that. And I tell all my friends who have recently had babies, of my clients, is that you do not get that first year back. So to be able to have that moment, to be at home, to even if you're working from home, but you still can have the baby right there, like it is
right.
You don't
Yeah,
get that
that
time
was
back.
really challenging. Yeah, I was working up until August, so it hasn't been that long. And that was pretty challenging to kind of juggle my husband's job as well as my job and the baby he wasn't walking just yet in August. So it's really hard. And, I know people will say, look back on these times like, yeah, this year we really struggled, but I think this is the year of, family and coming together like people haven't before with their family.
Absolutely. So, as you know, we don't talk a lot about, PCOS and any other underlying condition that we have when it comes to our infertility. I would love for you to leave the listeners that are here with just some encouraging words as they navigate their journeys, because I think we all are on different paths. And as we deal with this year of uncertainty, and this COVID-19, this coronavirus, just what encouraging words can you leave with our listeners who are just going through their own battles right now, whether it's through infertility, that's through loss or grief?
Right.
Leave us with some encouraging words.
So I always want to validate your feelings. And I tell this to everybody. You're allowed to feel how you feel, and you shouldn't let other people make you feel bad for feeling that way. Infertility is hard. Infertility sucks. Loss is hard. Sucks. It's the worst thing that people have gone through. Don't allow people to police your feelings. And I also say that as doctors also. If you have a hunch about something, and that's where I think we've turned the corners in different parts of our journey. If you feel passionately about something, or if you feel like something is not right, don't be afraid to speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself with doctors, specifically concerning PCOS, because a lot of doctors will brush Black women off, especially as, oh, just lose weight. But it's not that simple. This is, a metabolic hormonal disorder. So, don't be afraid to keep changing doctors until you find one who's going to listen to you. Doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's, your same race, but just find someone who's going to be in your corner and champion you. And, always listen to yourself. You're your best advocate going through any loss or infertility.
Absolutely. So where can we connect with you after this? Drop your YouTube and your Instagram page for us.
Sure. So I am at Bella. Belle, like ringing a bell is the first one. Belle with an E, like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And Bella, Belle with an A, at Instagram. And my YouTube is the same name.
Thank you so much, Brittney, for being on the podcast and sharing your story with us. It's been a blessing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. There are so many ways to connect with the Sisters in Loss community. Join our monthly support group, our Sisters in Loss Healing Collective at sistersinlosshealing.com. Join our free Facebook group at sistersinloss.com/community, or text sisters to 797979 to download your free Journal to Healing ebook. That is sisters to 797979 to download your free Journal to Healing ebook. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sisters in Loss, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yeah, girl, we on YouTube at Sisters in Loss TV. We love you for listening. Keep the faith. Until next time, this is Erica, and I'll talk to you soon.